Hi, my name is Jen Duke, and this is the EDL 853 case study, Module 8, Get This Child Out of My Room. So this case involves a student who is labeled as having a behavioral disorder, and he is beginning to exhibit some behaviors that he hadn't previously. And so his classroom teacher is demanding that he be removed from her classroom, and part of this is that there is a brand new special education teacher that has been hired this year, and so the teacher has kind of gone in and demanded that this child be removed. Also, the student is dealing with some changes in his family life at home that could be affecting him negatively. So what do I know? I know about the case that Susan Green is a brand new special education hire, so she's fresh out of college. Because of the rural setting of the district, the leadership hierarchy is a little bit different. There's not a specific building administrator present day to day to help with supervision and decision making. Nancy Taylor is a third grade teacher who has the student with the behavioral disorder in her class. His name is Carl. We also know that Carl's family dynamic has changed recently, which has included a rather nasty divorce, which has coincided with these behaviors that he hasn't exhibited before. He's gone from self-abusive behaviors to directing his anger at his teacher. Mrs. Taylor, who is his teacher, wants the new special education teacher to just remove Carl from her classroom without fully exploring the issue. They do have an IEP meeting to implement a new behavior plan that Mrs. Green spent a lot of time putting together. And that IEP meeting showed that there is definitely a lot of dysfunction at home that could be impacting Carl emotionally. So here are some things that I would need to know. How are the emotional issues being explored in order to support Carl? How can building leadership be more involved in Carl's day? Does Mrs. Taylor, the classroom teacher, need more support in her classroom in order to help Carl and the rest of the class? How can Mrs. Taylor be educated on the use of interventions versus just having difficult children removed from her classroom, which was the case last year with the former special education teacher? It would be that Mrs. Taylor, if she were having difficulty, the former teacher who had been there for quite some time would just come in and take the child out of the classroom. So the problem is that building leadership needs to be present and involved more frequently in order to fully support Carl, Mrs. Taylor, and Susan Green, the new special education teacher, as well as the rest of the students in Carl's class, in order to ensure student success and achievement. So my plan of action would be, first, I would request that the superintendent be present on site until the situation is under control. Or if I were the assistant superintendent, I would request a substitute from my classroom so that I wasn't responsible for teaching and helping support the teachers in the situation with Carl and his classmates. I would then set up another meeting with Mrs. Wills, who is the district special education coordinator, with Susan Green, Mrs. Taylor as well, to further explore how we can support Carl and his family after what we experienced at the IEP meeting. Then, as part of that meeting, I would really ask for some more instruction and information regarding the intervention plan that Mrs. Wills and Susan Green came up with, and really try to help Mrs. Taylor understand why it's best for creating the most inclusive environment for Carl. And kind of in evaluating that situation, I would also look to see if there was maybe some specific professional learning that the staff might need around the area of most inclusive environment, intervention plans, behaviors, and things like that. Then once I felt like we were all on the same page, I would want to make sure I was present, visible, and available to help Susan Green and Mrs. Taylor follow through on the intervention plan that was decided upon, and just see how this might be affecting the rest of the students, ask questions, observe, and again, just be ready to help with the implementation of that plan. Simultaneously, I would also have reached out to the junior high where Carl's siblings are attending, because we also know that Carl's siblings are experiencing some emotional behaviors and they're receiving support. So I would want to talk with the administration and support staff to see if something that they're doing could help us serve Carl. And then last, I would stay in close communication with Susan Green and Mrs. Taylor about how the plan was working over time. I would also communicate with the superintendent and Mrs. Wills and make sure that if things needed to be adjusted or revisited for the well-being of the entire class, including Carl, we could work through it together. So some of the strategies that were a part of my plan of action: by requesting full-time building administrative duties during the situation, I am ensuring that there is the possibility of the most effective instructional environment and giving me the chance to really support student achievement while supporting the staff. By working closely with the district coordinator of special education and then receiving feedback from fellow administrators, that helps me be a more effective decision maker, therefore helping the students and Carl and the staff as well. And then just being available to monitor the learning environment for Carl and his classmates, and just to ensure that that instructional environment meets the needs of all students. So my plan of action and eventual resolution is what's best for students, because by collaborating on best practice, whether that was intervention best practice or instructional best practice in a case like this with Carl, and working with district leaders, all of our students benefit from that instructionally. By finding a way to be present daily versus just as part of the day's duties and not having to teach my own class while helping support the situation, it helps create the best learning environment for the students. And then finally, by supporting the staff, so Mrs. Taylor, Susan Green, and professional learning around behavioral interventions that are suitable in a situation like this, not just for Carl, but the rest of the students, it helps us create the most positive, effective instructional environment for all. Throughout this case study, I was thinking that the district should reevaluate the way they have determined building leadership allocations. While I know it's a rural school district and the budget factors in, the well-being and the need that students have and staff to have building leadership available on a regular basis, I think is too important to leave the way it is. I was feeling concerned for Carl, his family, and his classmates, and want to do all I can to help them all be successful and happy. And then I was valuing the work that Susan Green, as a new hire, put into helping solve the situation with Carl in the best way possible. Some unresolved issues, again going back to district leadership. If the district was not inclined to change the leadership distribution, then how can this job, whether it's the assistant superintendent, be done in the most effective manner for the teachers and the students in the building? Is there more that can be done to support students who may need it or teachers who may need that support? And then how to continue to improve collaboration, and in particular, build that relationship between the new special education hire and Mrs. Taylor. Part of Category 5 is Standard 2. An educational leader promotes the academic success and personal well-being of every student by enhancing instructional capacity. And Component 1 talks about academic success. So the fact that I was requesting a substitute so that I could perform leadership duties specific to what was going on throughout the day at the school promotes the academic success of all students. By observing and monitoring the follow-through of the intervention plan, I'm protecting the academic success of all students, not just Carl. And being willing, ready, and available to collaborate, if that plan was not successful, proves that I'm operating with the academic success of all students in mind. Component 2 is around well-being. So by scheduling another meeting with the district coordinator and with Ms. Green, Mrs. Taylor, and myself, then we're ensuring that we're all working together to do the best we can to look out for the well-being of students. By collaborating with the junior high about the support of Carl's siblings, shows that we're concerned about Carl's well-being and the other students as well. And then by not disrupting the daily routine of students' learning while I was investigating the case, it protects the well-being of students. And then lastly, Component 3 is around instructional capacity. So considering how the intervention plan is affecting the rest of the class, not just Carl, shows that I'm concerned about the instructional capacity of the entire classroom. By potentially providing more professional learning if that is necessary in the area of interventions and best practice, promotes the growth of instructional capacity within the school, and then just continuous evaluation of the implementation of the intervention plan and continuing to work with Mrs. Taylor and Miss Green, as well as any other staff in the building and students, promotes instructional capacity in that regard. So thank you for your attention. I appreciate it.